part of your board?
Not on the board, but I work with them. Can I help you?
Yes, certainly. I thought you worked with them. You can explain something. What do you think? Should I pay like another 20, 30? You're very good.
Oh, yeah.
Let me know when you run for office, because I'll be doing this. I'm a little. You're very No, you're. I'm a liar. You are by a line. And I know you. You don't need to make it up. Well, all I know is I was voting in the presidential election. Whatever happens, we're in a country that lives together.
Turn around.
Do a little angle.
Watch that.
I'm gonna get started. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our November Board of Education meeting, and sorry to keep everyone waiting. We are just going to get started now, and can everyone please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Please take a seat. And at this moment, we would like to have Dr. Christopher Hale, the coordinator of Fine and Performing Arts, to recognize students that were selected to be in the Nassau County art exhibit. So Dr. Hale, it's all yours.
Thank you, Ms. Chang, Dr. Rogers, and the Board of Education for giving us the opportunity to feature our visual arts department here in Syosset. Many people know that just like our music department, our visual arts department is nothing short of phenomenal, and they're busy all year round. Is there any way we could cut the music? I feel like I'm accepting the awards at the Oscars. They're trying to play me off. Okay, so they're busy all year round. Something we really encourage our students to do is to submit their work to public exhibitions all over the island. Our musicians get the time on stage where they perform and they get their recognition, but our young artists, their performance is in the studio. So until we get their work out there and we get their work seen, we're unable to just get them the recognition that they really truly deserve. And when you see the work that you're going to see tonight, you'll understand just how much dedication has gone into them honing their craft to the degree that it is. So just a short list of some of the exhibits that they participate in year-round: the Long Island's Best exhibit at Heckscher, the Art League of Long Island, Huntington Arts Council, Huntington Camera Club, New York State Art Teachers, PTA Reflections, Scholastic Art and Writing Competition. So the list goes on and on. But what we wanted to recognize this evening was a very special art competition that happens every year, and it takes place at the Art Guild over in Port Washington. The Art Guild is an old institution, but the building itself is actually from the late 1600s. It was one of the original houses of the Hewlett family on Long Island. It's a beautiful place, but it's very small. So they only take about 78 art pieces from all of the students in Nassau County. What I love about this exhibit is that it's an open call. So any student, grades 9 through 12, have the ability to submit their work, to be seen, and to be considered to be a part of the show. So just to be a part of the show, just to give you an idea, the total number of pieces they accept each year are about 78. And they receive hundreds and hundreds of submissions. So just to be selected for this exhibit as a high schooler is really quite an honor. So to give you an idea, we first started doing the show, believe it or not, 3 years ago. In 2022, we had 12 students accepted to the show, which was terrific. And then the year after that, we had 16 students accepted to the show, which was phenomenal. This year, out of the 78 pieces selected from around the county, 30 of them were from Syosset, so it was really tremendous. So if we can start the slideshow from the beginning, we'll see just a 90-second slideshow of some of the work that was exhibited yesterday at the Art Guild. And that music, just so you know, is also our Assassin High School Chamber Orchestra as an accompaniment. So I'd like to read the names of the students. We have some of them, most of them with us tonight. There was a beautiful reception yesterday at the Art Guild. I know many of the families were there as well. So just, I'm going to read all 30 names, and please join me in recognizing them. Minki Lee, Harsh Dashi, Isabella Chavasta, Jasmine Wang, Juliana Ragosa, Caitlin Zhang, Melody Chen, Irene Lee, Olivia LeBron, Catherine Yee, Katie Kuhn, who also got honorable mention, Kingsley Liu, Zia Mukherjee, Elizabeth Way, Ben Siegel, Matthew Robotham, Sophia Zhu, Casey Lee, Wayne Kim, Megan Liu, Alyssa Huang, Andrew Mo, Larissa Mallon, Xavier Tan, Caitlin Melling, Yitong Kay, Julia Rhee, Olivia LaQuatra, Allison Lin, and Janice Lee. Please join me in congratulating our artists once again.
Okay, please give them another round of applause as they exit the auditorium. Congratulations. Thank you. No, not a problem. Okay, and we are going to take a few moments for the board members to get up to stage to begin our meeting, and you are more than welcome to stay. If not, this is your moment to make your graceful exit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, to begin the meeting, we will have the public hearing on Policy 5300, Code of Character, Conduct, and Support. And the audience to the public portion for this part. So I am going to call on Mr. Brian Tevet.
Madam President, as I am sure you are aware, according to the New York State education law, in order for a school district to amend its code of conduct, a public hearing is required which, quote, provides for the participation of school personnel, parents, students, and any other interested parties, unquote. A website in which the public can post comments is not a substitute for a public hearing. It seems to me that the district has not gone to great lengths to encourage the kind of public participation in tonight's hearing that the state education law is calling for. Unless someone has pored over the legal notices page of the Syosset Advance or Syosset Jericho Tribune, or has carefully read all of the bullet points in the most recent Board of Education meeting reminder, they would hardly know that there was a public hearing tonight on a matter of great importance to the community. It is worth comparing this state of affairs with the effort that the district makes to publicize something it really cares about, such as the facilities improvement bond. Regarding the topic of the current public hearing, I want to draw attention to a significant change being proposed to the District Code of Character, Conduct, and Support in the section titled Public Conduct on School Property. The current text reads, quote, the restrictions on public conduct on school property and its school functions contained in this code are not intended to limit freedom of speech or peaceful assembly. In the revisions that the board has proposed, the words freedom of speech or peaceful assembly have been changed to protected speech or assembly. The phrases freedom of speech and peaceably to assemble appear in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and their meanings are well understood by all Americans. Furthermore, the New York State Constitution states in Article 1, Section 8, quote, no law shall be passed to restrain the liberty of speech, unquote, and in Article 1, Section 9, quote, no law shall be passed abridging the rights of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government or any department thereof, unquote. In the Tinker case of 1968, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that neither students nor teachers, quote, shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate, unquote. So if the board cannot legally limit freedom of speech or peaceful assembly on school property or at school functions, why is the board considering removing language from the Code of Character, Conduct, and Support, which explicitly says that it does not intend to limit these constitutional rights? The phrase protected speech or assembly is not adequate, as it has no clear legal meaning and nothing like the profound legal and historical ramifications of the phrases freedom of speech and peaceful assembly. What in the world is meant by protected speech or assembly, and who decides what speech or assembly is protected? The community really needs an explanation as to why the board is making this change. If the board has found it necessary to no longer declare its intention not to limit freedom of speech or peaceful assembly, what then is the board's intention? In the community update email, which was sent to us on October 18th, the district states, quote, we anticipate making more extensive changes consistent with the anti-bias task force recommendations in the next round of revisions, unquote. Regarding the change to the public conduct on school property section, which I highlighted, was the reason for that change to lay the groundwork for these more extensive changes, which are said to be consistent with the anti-bias task force recommendations? To be specific, was the board concerned that some of these planned extensive changes could be interpreted as impinging on freedom of speech or freedom of peaceful assembly? I would appreciate it if the board can answer these questions during this public hearing.
Thank you. This closes the audience to the public on the public hearing portion. And thank you so much for your comments. And the board did discuss the hearing part at a previous meeting, and it was also in the Dr. Rogers community update that was sent to the entire community. And then Dr. Rogers, did you want to?
Sure. So the reason for the change is because we're actually moving towards more precise definitions of words. So free speech is in the First Amendment of the Constitution, obviously, but the free speech language in the First Amendment has been subsequently amended over time by a series of court cases that have interpreted what is protected speech in that definition of free speech and what is not protected speech. So by using the term protected speech, we are explicitly referencing the First Amendment as the Supreme Court has defined it over the years. So it does not limit any speech that was already protected. The language referred to protected speech before, but this is more precise language, and as we find ourselves in a period where more precision in language has proven necessary, that change was made. In terms of my comment to the community about more extensive revisions to the Code of Conduct, one of the recommendations of the Anti-Bias Task Force was to make the Code of Conduct more manageable, easier to navigate, have a plain language version, offer revisions in multiple languages, in addition to the languages that it's offered in now, have a student version of the Code of Conduct that can be shared at each of the 3 grade band levels, elementary, middle, and secondary, that is consistent with the developmental age of the students that are there. So that's a fairly lengthy task, and so I didn't want the community to think that we had overlooked those recommendations from the Anti-Bias Task Force, but rather that the changes that were being incorporated into the code had been refinements that had been worked on, but they are not as extensive as what was recommended by the task force. So that work of doing what the task force had recommended has started, but it's not something that's going to happen right away, but I didn't want the community to think that it had been overlooked. So that's the reason for my statement, and that's the explanation for the change in language.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rogers. And then we are going to have Ms. Jill Sanders from Colin Danowski to present the district's audit report.
Thank you very much. Good evening to the Board of Education, Administration, and the community. I am a partner with Cullen and Danowski. Each year, the State Education Department requires that the school district undergo an external audit, and that's really a review of the books and records to make sure that what's leading up to them, which is the financial statement, is fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And so I've gone ahead and we've completed the audit, and we've rendered our opinion. There's 3 pages of the opinion in the financial statement. With respect to the internal control structure, the school district has a very good internal control structure in place. These are the checks and balances over the various financial transactions that the school district handles. We had no management letter. We have no communication under AUC 265 describing any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. The financial statement snapshot as of June 30th, 2024 shows that the school district is in good financial condition. They work very hard to maintain the spending within the budget and try to generate whatever revenue they can by investing funds in places which are secure and collateralized in order to generate and take advantage of the good interest rates that were delivered during the last year. So it's a good financial report that I'm giving to the Board of Education, Administration, and the community. We have 2 other documents that we provide. One is a communication under AUC 260 to the Board of Governance, and this would tell you whether or not there were any difficulties performing the audit, and there were none, whether or not there were any deviations from the standards, and there were none. And we did have great cooperation from the school district business office and staff. The 3rd document is an extra classroom activity report, and it shows you by club or activity, those that are authorized by the school district, what receipts were collected, what expenses took place during the year, and there's an opening cash balance and ending cash balance for each of those clubs and activities in the aggregate. And so we looked at that, and we looked at the controls over the extra classroom activity funds in our work, and those controls are good and appropriate.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders, for the presentation. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. And next, we are going to have the next item will be the approval of minutes of the October 15th, 2024 meeting. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? And the next item is going to be Dr. Ruvel. Can we have the treasurer's report and the appropriate adjustments, please?
Thank you. As shown on the treasurer's report, the cash on hand for the month end September 2024 was $80,332,027.82. It shows that bank balances for all cash accounts were reconciled to the book balances and were collateralized in accordance with the district's banking agreements and investment policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rufo. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed?
Please speak up.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. And the next item is going to be, we have the 2025-2026 school year calendar, and the board will be adopting that at the next meeting. Okay. And moving on to the next item, that's going to be Dr. Rogers' superintendent's report. And so Dr. Rogers, all yours, please.
Thank you. There are a handful of items to go through. I know some of them have gotten a lot of attention over the years, so hopefully we can go through and I can provide the public and the folks here with a lot of information, because I know that some of these items have generated a lot of attention. First, over the course of the past 2 years, we've been discussing state requirement to retire our existing mascot, which the board has already done, and to start a process for selecting a new mascot. I announced at the last month's meeting that process would begin. I've asked Mr. Stuber, our athletic director, Mr. Steinberg, our assistant superintendent for secondary education, to lead that process, but this is going to be a community-driven process. We have until the end of this year to make changes to our property to reflect. We don't have to adopt a new mascot by the end of the year, but we do have to make changes where the old mascot is reflected in the property. So obviously it would be an advantage to us if we had the opportunity to switch to something new, so that we would only make the changes to our facilities once. So we contemplate a process that works through the fall and winter to assemble a committee of folks to do essentially two things: to come up with a set of ideas for what would constitute a mascot that maybe reflects certain values of the communities and might have some just logistical advantages, easy to recognize, not consistent with something that somebody else has, et cetera. And again, in previous board meetings, I've given lists of the kinds of things that other school districts have used to evaluate it, but we would want a committee of our own residents to make those decisions for us, and to lead a process by which members of the community can provide input, both in terms of how they want the community to be reflected, and also a place to collect ideas from residents or people connected to the Syosset community, perhaps as alumni or parents, to make suggestions for ideas that they would want to have first the committee consider, and then ultimately have the community consider. Obviously, if we have the community consider every idea that comes along, it might be difficult for us to move through that process. So the committee's responsibility would be to ultimately narrow the choices to those that most closely meet the rubric that they devise, but then ultimately to put that choice back to the community so that the community has the opportunity to share its input. We're envisioning a public comment period on some proposed options, and then having the committee narrow those options based on that feedback to ultimately create a handful of options that the community would vote on. So I've watched dozens of other communities go through this process and seen some of the processes that they've used, and this is consistent with what has typically been the process that most school districts have used. Our hope would be, if this is successful, that the launch would be sometime in the spring. That would inform our decisions about how we would make changes to the facilities, and it would also give this year's students the opportunity to see what the outcome of this process would be before they leave for the summer. So we'll be sending out email from the district to notify people about this process. Obviously, we'll be advertising it on social media in the hopes that folks who are not on email but are still following the school district as alumni would have the opportunity to see what's going on. We'll notify folks about this on multiple occasions, hopefully in order to have the broadest possible input into the process, so that hopefully there's a lot of sense of buy-in in terms of what the process yields. So I want to talk a lot about regionalization, and I'm going to try To go through some of the process, this will be a detailed presentation. I don't want it to, it may end up being boring, but I'm not trying for boring. I'm trying to go through a lot of history and also a little bit of a civics lesson in terms of how things work. And I'll just say at the outset, this is an area in which I feel I have some depth and experience. Prior to being the superintendent here at Syosset, now in my 11th year, I was the superintendent of Nassau BOCES. I was the BOCES superintendent for almost 5 years. And prior to that, I worked for 20 years in Albany. The first 5 of those years, I worked for the legislature doing the work of writing laws and working with state agencies as they wrote their own regulations. And then for 14 years, I worked for a state association that worked with the state education department as they regulated schools and as I worked for the superintendents that were regulated by the state education department. My point being, I've got about 35 years of experience working with state government in a lot of different roles and capacities. So some of this feels very familiar. Some of it feels familiar in that it's not well communicated, and that is familiar. And some of this is something new and a little bit different, and I think that has been startling to some folks. So I'll try and contextualize things. I'll try and walk through my own thinking on where this is headed and my thinking on where we can be influential and where we might need to be influential. But ultimately, the end of this conversation is going to be a conversation about something that I think is a larger concern that we should be attentive to. So the first is a little bit of background on how some things work in state government. So there are several hierarchies of things that function like laws. Obviously, our state constitution is the highest law of the state. And within that constitution, the legislature can adopt laws. They can't adopt laws that violate the Constitution. They'd be unconstitutional. Sometimes courts have to rule that the laws that are adopted are unconstitutional. Within each of the agency's ultimate regulatory body, so for most executive branch agencies, that ultimate regulatory body ends up being the commissioner. For certain agencies that have boards, like the Board of Regents is a legislative branch agency, not an executive branch agency. The board is the ultimate authority that ends up adopting a regulation. No regulation can be created that doesn't derive its authority from a law, a statute that's already been adopted. So what the regulation can do is it can talk about how to implement that statute, it can talk about how to define that statute, it can talk about a process for how something that's in the statute will be accomplished by the regulatory agency or by the entities that they govern. But what a regulation can't do is it can't create a power that didn't first exist in law, and it can't expand a power that does exist in law beyond what the law contemplated. So laws can't be changed except by the entity that created the law. So statutes, laws, require approval by a majority of the Assembly, a majority of the Senate, and the governor, whoever that governor may be at the time. Regulations can be done and undone by the same body that created them, the agency, in this case, the State Board of Regents. So that's important because statutes are hard to get enacted and they're hard to change. Regulations are less difficult to get enacted and also no more difficult to change than they are to enact. Second thing is there are two processes. So the adoption of regulations follows something called the State Administrative Procedures Act, SAPA. So every agency has to follow SAPA. And SAPA sets out timelines and processes for how regulatory bodies will go through and notify the public of the regulations that they're contemplating, how quickly they can adopt those regulations. All regulations that are proposed to be adopted are released in something called the State Register. Most of the time, the State Register is one of the most boring documents that you could look at because it's a lot of very mundane regulations that all the agencies are adopting, and the State Register will have any regulation that is in the process of being adopted by any state agency. So there are two tracks that can be used by an agency when they adopt a regulation. They can make a finding that there is an emergency and what they believe is that the regulation needs to take effect immediately. And so they use the emergency process, but really the only difference between the two processes is in one process, both of them require about 90 days to take final effect. Both of them require full adoption in order to take final effect. Both of them require 60-day comment period. The only difference is that if you use the emergency authority, they take effect right away. If you don't use the emergency authority, they take effect after the 90 days when they're permanently adopted. So what the department has said in this case is they wanted to get school districts working on the strengths and weaknesses tool right away, and so that was their rationale for using the emergency process, essentially to get school districts started on the tasks that they've assigned us. Then lastly, it's important to know, and there's been some consternation, that these regulations have somehow created some new powers or limited some other powers. So the powers of boards of education are also contained in statute, and not just in the statute, but in every court case that has subsequently defined the roles of boards. As boards test the limit of these authorities that they have in law, sometimes the courts will rule in favor of the board, sometimes the courts will rule against the board, but all of these things represent the body of law, and the case law supersedes regulation that defines how school districts operate, because school districts can operate with any of the powers and duties of boards. So strictly because of the historical accident of how a school district may have merged through the period of the first half of the last century. So in the early 1900s, there were 10,000 school districts in New York, and there was a whole lot of mergers and reorganizations through about the 1950s. And if you used one process, the school district that you wound up with was called a union-free school district. It's not free of unions. It was united through a unionization, and then it became free of the oversight, ironically, of the district superintendent. A central school district was created from a merger known as a centralization. I give you all of this history only to say that there is no difference in law between a union-free school district like Jericho, our neighbor next door, or a central school district like Syosset or Plainview as a central school district. In law, 1709 and 1804 read identically. Why did the legislature keep these two sections of law separate all this time? Because no one knew what would break if they merged them. So are there other laws that refer to Section 1804? Is there another law somewhere that refers to 1709? If you merged them, would you break one of these references? So they've just continued like this, but every time the legislature makes a change to 1709, they make a mirror image change to 1804. All of which is to say that nothing in a regulation that the State Education Department, the Board of Regents adopts can change the fact that the powers and duties of a Board of Education are already specified in law. Similarly, and I know this having been a district superintendent for 4.5 years, the powers and duties of the BOCES superintendent are also written in law. They're in 2216. The entire 2216 of the education law specifies most of the powers and duties of the district superintendent, not all. But that whole series of laws, 2215, 16, 17, 18, this is where all the powers and duties of the district superintendent can be found. And these links will go live when this presentation is posted online, and folks can read all of these sections of law. But I point out paragraph 14 specifically because the language in paragraph 14 is essentially paralleled and parroted in the regulation that the department adopted back in October. And it doesn't create a new power, it just restates the power that already exists in law to make investigations, make reports to the Commissioner of Education on any matter, or act as the Commissioner shall request from time to time. So as the BOCES superintendent, I did do investigations in component school districts in Nassau County on behalf of the Commissioner at that time. That power, that duty already exists in law. But in the end, all one can do, all the BOCES superintendent can do with that investigation is give it back to the Commissioner, and then the Commissioner decides what to do or not to do with that investigation. So ultimately, the power doesn't rest with the BOCES superintendent. The power to do the investigation on behalf of the Commissioner rests with the BOCES superintendent, but the commissioner always had the power to do an investigation in the first place. My point is, it doesn't create any new authority for the district superintendent. Another point is, there's no way that the regulation can create the context where the state would be able to force mergers on school districts because, again, the process for doing a merger is controlled by law, and law supersedes regulation. So the process for mergers is in 2218 of the education law, and it requires 6 votes total before a merger can occur. Both boards of education of the, let's say it's 2 districts that want to merge, sometimes it's more than 2, but both boards have to vote for it, and then both communities have to vote for it not once, but twice. So the boards vote for the merger first time, and it's called a straw poll, and if both communities vote in favor of the straw poll, then the Commissioner of Education will allow a study to occur where the reorganization, the merger, is studied. Then after the study occurs, the study is presented to the public, and then both communities have to vote again, having seen the results of the study, and they both have to vote yes. Even if one votes yes, if the other votes no, it doesn't go through. All of which is to say, there's nothing in the regulation that can compel mergers between school districts. That process takes a long time. It has a lot of steps in the process, and in the end, the local school district is the one that's in control. And then ultimately, on this particular regulation that is proven worrisome, the State Ed Department has said in writing that school districts will not have to pursue activities that they don't agree to. Now, folks are reading the regulation closely. They found the word compel in there. I found the word compel in there as well. And that's the one word in there that I think is completely discordant with what their stated messaging has been all along. And I think they have an obligation to go back and harmonize the language of the regulation with what their messaging is. But in a practical sense, if you're looking for enforcement, their ability to enforce is no more powerful than the commissioner's enforcement powers, which are in 306 of the education law. And there's a whole series of court cases that have subsequently defined and limited the power of the commissioner to act under Section 306 of the education law. So if the department has put in writing how they intend to operate, the same courts that have looked at other cases like this over the years and defined where the commissioner's powers are would see that the department has repeatedly in writing messaged to all the regulated entities, school districts, that they do not have to perform activities that they haven't consented to. And this would be powerful evidence of what the department was trying to do, notwithstanding the letter of their regulation. Nevertheless, today there was a Regents meeting in Albany. So we're paying attention to the Regents meeting, and as I anticipated, Long Island's Regent, Roger Tillis, asked for amendments to the regulation to clarify that no district would be required to participate against their will. And the counsel to the State Education Department, their attorney, said that they're going to bring those amendments back to the board in December. So the regents cannot permanently adopt their regulation until their January meeting. So if they're presented with amendments to the regulation in December before they adopt their final regulation in January, they would have full opportunity to consider those comments, those changes. So there is a lot of time left to see if the department harmonizes their regulation with what their stated intent has been in writing on their website and over again at public meetings and on the webinar that you may have read. If the department doesn't harmonize their regulations with what they've been saying all along their intent is, then I think I would become concerned. But right now, what I'm seeing is, and again, having watched the agency's work for 30 years, I'm seeing an agency put out a regulation, take 60 days worth of comment, take a lot of criticism, and immediately at a staff level, respond to that criticism by saying the things that folks would want them to say, and then saying that they're going to bring back changes for the board, the official board, to consider before they do any kind of a final adoption. So what it looks like to me is they're being responsive to the criticism that they've heard. They have a process by which they can change what they put in the emergency regulations, and they can do it in plenty of time before they adopt anything permanently. That said, I think we should certainly hold them accountable for following through on this, because I would not want to see them make any changes. And as I said in my letter to the community, if there were to be a threat to local control, a threat to our autonomy, a requirement for us to have locally raised tax funds shared across jurisdictions, compelled to participate in programs that were not in the interests of our students or our community, I would be at the front of the line fighting. And again, because I've worked in this advocacy community for my whole career, I think I'm an effective fighter when fighting is required. But I don't see things moving in that direction. I do think that we can hold them accountable for making good on their promises and the things that they've put in writing. And we have time to see how they do that. So my recommendations, thanks. So my recommendations to the board would be, I think the regents should refine their regulatory language. I think they should remove the language that uses the word compel because it's unnecessary given their stated purpose. And I think they should make an opt-out provision explicit in the regulation. It's great that they've said it on their website and that it's put in writing, but there's no reason why they shouldn't adopt that and make it part of their regulation as well. I think they've also kind of punted on coming up with criteria for what the regional plans should look like. What they've said is that they don't want to tie anyone's hands or limit our imaginations. And I appreciate having my imagination unlimited, but I think what would be better is if they gave a sense of what they saw some plans looking like, and we could then redefine it. I do see an opportunity for school districts in this process because there are a handful of things that I think the state has not been adequately attentive to. And if the regents are asking us to highlight areas where they need to do better regulating or pay more attention, I can think of 3 right off the top of my head. As a result of a court case in Connecticut, we are now required to pay for the education of particularly disabled youngsters, not just through the age of 21, but through the age of 22. But the state did not change any of the ways that they pay for special education to reflect that we now have to provide 1 more year. So even though the state has told us that they've moved the age from 21 to 22, they haven't made any of the changes that would provide the funding that they provide for students 21 and below. So every school district was responsible for paying for that 22nd year on their own. So that's something that needs to change and something they need to be attentive to. Second, I believe at the beginning of this year, we were fortunate in that we were able to find seats for all of our preschool special needs students, but across the county of Nassau, there were 300 students that we were short 300 seats for special education students. This is a place where the department needs to identify and find more resources because there should be no child that doesn't have a seat in preschool special education if they deserve one. And then lastly, when I was the superintendent in Nassau BOCES, one of the services that we offered to school districts was inpatient mental health services. And I testified before the state and told them that they could triple the number of seats that I had, and I still wouldn't be able to clear my waiting list. And here it is 11 years later, and the problem is no better today than it was 11 years ago when I testified. So if anything, what we've seen post-pandemic is there are more challenges for students with mental health. So this is another area where I think the state needs to be much more aggressive and much more innovative in providing us with services. So my plan for this process is to use it as a way to argue for things that the state should be more attentive to and supports that we need from Albany, not just what we can do here, but what they can do for us. So as I said, what should our red line be? My recommendation would be our red lines would be a loss of local control or some sort of compulsory participation in a regional plan. Short of that, if they want us to get together and talk about ideas, I kind of feel like it's my obligation as a steward of public funds to at least explore ideas that could make us better at serving kids or more efficient at using taxpayer resources. But again, as long as they don't cross the red lines of local control and compulsory participation.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Rogers, for clarifying a lot of the points. And then for now, I would like, we can take questions just on the mascot process. Anyone has any questions on just the mascot? Okay. Ms. Edmondson.
So, sorry, but just on the mascot selection under the Create the Mascot Committee, you wrote no limit to the number of members on the committee, which is fantastic in concept, because I really don't want to turn anybody away who wants to be involved. My concern is, or do we have a concern in how efficient that will be, like too many cooks in the kitchen type of scenario? Maybe we should think about that a little.
Thanks. I can't remember exactly which meeting, but we did kind of bat this around as a board, and I think we were feeling like we didn't want to turn anyone away. We mentioned that Sewanaka had managed to do this without imposing a limit on the number of people who could participate, and we were sort of looking at that as a model. I share your worry that we might become an unwieldy committee, and that might slow down our ability to move through this year. And we were talking about how we would structure it. I think to the extent that there may be some alumni who want to participate, there may be some folks who aren't even in state. So we're imagining a hybrid kind of a meeting where there might be some people in person and other people who are participating or maybe just observing through a streaming link or a Zoom link or something like that. I'm under the impression that there are going to be quite a few students who want to be involved in that, and I think we also wouldn't want to turn students away. So if we get into this a couple of months and the committee is, for whatever reason, an obstacle to our progress, I'll certainly come back and report that to you and ask you for some advice on how we should move. But having seen other districts manage this successfully, including districts that are about our size, I'm willing to take our chances and hope for the best.
Okay. Anyone else? Just Ms. Levitan.
So I'm happy to see that we have unlimited number, actually, for that committee, considering what we effectively did away with, right, a 50-year-old tradition. So my question is, how do we reach alumni, let's say, who is not on our email list already, who is not necessarily following the board meetings, who is not routinely visiting the website, so he or she can realize that there's an opt-in email option. How do we ensure we reach every single member of this community who is passionate about the issue and who would like to partake in this?
Well, I won't promise you every single one because I don't have an algorithm to get there, but I do know that there are groups of alumni, certainly more recent alumni, that have maintained social media channels and things like that. So we're going to try and take advantage of social media as much as possible. Certainly anyone who's been connected to the school district in the last 2 years has followed the fact that this regulation has changed and that lots of school districts are going through this process. So I think that if there was someone in the community that's been following this for a while, or even in our extended community of alumni, they knew that this day was coming, and so they've been attentive to it. We will certainly use our own social media channels. We will ask the alumni who are more closely connected to us to share it with the networks that they belong in, and hopefully we will reach as many people as we possibly can. Undoubtedly, someone will be overlooked in that process, but we are going to try and use all the tools that we do have.
Okay. Anyone else? Just the process with mascot. Okay. And then we'll be taking questions from the board regarding regionalization. And then, Dr. Rogers, Thank you for that presentation. It was very comprehensive and very detailed and to the point. And we definitely appreciate the commissioner and the deputy commissioner clarifying that participating in the plan is not mandatory and does not compromise local control. And we also appreciate that they have put those assurances in writing on their website. And I'm just thinking the next step, is really to clarify further the regulation to make it clearly consistent with their assurances, and that the regions need to readopt the regulation at their December meeting, as you stated, that they're having that meeting, and that the new regulation should reflect that change. And I think that's really, to clean up the verbiage they use in what they put out. And I don't know if anyone else, on the board has a different opinion or wanted to, okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Greco. I know you had your hand up for a while.
So, Dr. Rogers, thank you for that background, both the law and the analysis. I think it was great. And I also appreciate the letter you sent last week. You made an important point in that letter, which you've made again tonight, that I worry gets missed. You stated that we are going to fight any attempt to undermine local control of our schools, to compel partnerships that are not in our community's interests, to redistrict taxpayer funds to other jurisdictions, and to merge our district with others. So thank you for that. That's a big statement. Obviously, I agree with every word of it. But this is where I get a little nervous. It sounds like in your letter in the presentation tonight that NYSED is just looking to require us to participate in those surveys and to attend meetings with other districts, and that the BOCES superintendent basically is going to facilitate the putting together of a plan. And I've reviewed all the literature, the website, everything you're talking about, even the meeting today, and it does appear that they're limiting this regionalization to just a conversation. And if their goal is to have these plans that can allow districts to work together, it doesn't sound all that different to what we're doing already, and what we should be doing already. I think that's a given. So this is nothing new to us, but at the same time, the regs go far beyond that. It isn't, in my mind, just the word compel. And you were pretty clear of your views that it needs to change. I just see no reason why there was a difference, why the regulations were done the way they were done, and why they would grant those broad powers. So, I have a bunch of examples. I'm not going to use them all tonight, but one of them jumped out at me. There's the presentation that was sent to us. I believe it was at the Nassau Suffolk School Boards Association. They quote, upon completion of the regional plan, school districts need only pursue implementation of activities they have agreed or consented to. Obviously, I'm fine with that, but that's not even close to what the regs say. There's no consent right in the regs, and Section 124 talks not just about being forced to have us comply with it, but they talk about implementing approved regionalization plans, and that we must undertake other responsibilities in the plans that are also directed by the commissioner. So I think there's a lot of cleanup that is needed here, and obviously I don't agree with any of it, and I think it's all inconsistent with what they're saying now. But I don't understand why they have a difference, and because of that, and I'm not going to, trust me, I don't want to grandstand about why I think they did this. I think for the purpose of this meeting today, we should talk about getting out in front of it, and there's no reason in my mind not to send a letter now, just asking for what you've recommended, because you're basically saying, they're going to do this. And I agree, I think they're going to do it. But why wouldn't we send a letter just reminding them, hey, we're still here, and you need to make these changes, especially, it's not hard for them to include an opt-out or to make it optional. That's a couple of words to the regulation. So I just don't like the idea of waiting and seeing. I think you're already on board. I'm assuming most of us are going to be on board, or all of us are going to be on board to send a letter. I think we got good counsel that can write a letter. God knows I'm going to send my own letter as an individual, not as a board member. So I want to get that out there and just make sure we at least walk out of here tonight knowing we're going to do something.
Okay. Ms. Emerson?
I completely agree with Brian. I think we have to be very proactive. I think they are trying to step back a lot of the things that people have been confused, and I think they're very confusing and they're all over the place. And I think there's the whole recommendations page, I think, is including our red lines should be included, like fiscal autonomy, no loss of local control, no compulsory participation. It definitely has opportunities for mutual beneficial things across districts, but being compelled to do anything makes me nervous, and we should definitely be very clear on our boundaries.
I don't know if you want us all to see how we feel about. Okay. Okay. But I was actually going to say what Brian and Lynn said, fully agree that there doesn't seem to be any downside to putting a letter out there that says what we're okay with and what we're not okay with, and to say that we, want to maintain control and everything, everything that Brian and Lynn said. So I think that there's zero downside to sending a letter out, and we should do it.
Ms. Ostrick?
So I'm in agreement. I know this isn't the consensus part of the discussion, but the question I had is the regulation clear about what penalties might be enforced if we don't comply, even with the gathering of information or at any step along the way? Here's my worry, okay, and I don't know if this is out of place, and this is why I'm asking the question. The analogy I think of is when the federal government says everyone needs a speed limit on the highways, but we can't actually enforce a federal speed limit, so we're just going to withhold your funding if you don't have a speed limit. Do the penalties envisioned or allowed in the regs have the commissioner the ability to withhold our funding if we're not complying with various aspects?
So the short answer is yes. I said earlier that the commissioner's powers are in 306 of the Ed Law. So when I read the reg, I got to the word compel, and I said, oh, that's funny. The district superintendent will compel. The district superintendent has no power except those powers that are given by the commissioner. So, because as a district superintendent, I couldn't compel a thing. So I thought, okay, well, where would this compel power come from? So the only place where the commissioner has some power that she could delegate would be 306 of the Ed Law. So you go through 306 of the Ed Law. She has the ability to withhold funds, or she has the ability to remove officers. Those are the two powers that are in 306. So then you go through and start reading all of the case law that defines when the commissioner can actually implement those powers. And it turns out that the bar for removing a publicly elected official, all 9 of you, for example, is very high. So there are cases, again, the authority that is written in law is just a couple of sentences, but then you have pages and pages and pages of court cases behind it, and the book is called McKinney's. In the McKinney's, and you just see how that power is whittled down over and over again. And again, the same thing, the ability to withhold state aid. So particularly against the backdrop of the department saying and writing in multiple places over and over again that no one would be compelled to do this, I think it would be impossible for them to meet the bar that is in I'm not an attorney, I'm just somebody who's watched Albany for all these years, but I don't think that they've come anywhere near the bar that's in 306 for being able to exercise 2 of these really muscular penalties. So it circles back to where I think I see you going, which is if they've already said this is not their stated purpose, then they don't need that language in the regulation and they should change it. And just to respond to Mr. Greco's question, just hypothesizing aloud, why on earth would they have written the regulation this way in the first place? What I've observed over the years is that they get advice from attorneys, and attorneys say, well, it'd be even better if you threw this in there, and let's throw that in there too. And maybe this might happen, so throw this in there, and all of a sudden you have a lot more words than you need to accomplish the purpose you set out to do. That's not an unfamiliar process, watching regulations develop, or working with attorneys in other contexts. So I don't know that I would read as much intention into all those words. I think, if anything, I'm reading more intention out of the fact that they so quickly have been working to try and update their messaging. That seems to be more reflective of where their most agile selves are right now. So, to the extent that you want to hold them accountable for aligning the regulations with what their stated purpose has been, I think that's entirely appropriate.
Are there any more questions? Oh, sorry, Dr. Park.
So I do agree with sending a letter, but is there no downside in being in the front line of this fight for us? I think we need to evaluate very carefully if there is any downside for us, that we don't have to be in the forefront. If we can be maybe in the middle of that fight to kind of cover us, help us, so that we don't have any downside aspect of sending that letter, I'll be for that.
So Dr. Park, you're trying to figure out the pros and cons of being on the front line and also sending the letter. Okay.
So I don't see any cons for the approach that I hear the board coalescing around taking. The department has been clear in their messaging about limiting what they're trying to accomplish. You're asking them to make their regulations consistent with their messaging. You're not asking them to do anything that the commissioner herself and the deputy commissioner himself have not said repeatedly at statewide conferences in front of audiences literally of thousands. So I don't see any downside in that. What I wouldn't want to do is undermine our own credibility by exaggerating or mischaracterizing what the department is doing. I think your letter doesn't do either of those things. It just says, you've stated this, the regulations don't read that way. It sounds like, based on what the council said at today's Regents meeting, you're planning on making some changes to that. That's a great idea. Please follow through on that.
Yeah, and Dr. Rogers, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're in the comment period for the regulations currently, which means they're inviting us to send comments to them. I don't think it's particularly inflammatory to give commentary that says we don't agree with being compelled to follow regs that were initiated under an emergency procedure without consultation. I don't feel like that's an outrageous point.
So we're sending it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for your inputs, and then it's also very important that Dr. Rogers, in your community update that was sent to the community, the second paragraph. I'm not going to read. I'm not reading the entire thing, but it's really saying that anything that's not in our community interest or lose the local control, and I think that's very important in this context. And then it looks like the entire board is in agreement to send a letter, unless I'm wrong. Good. Okay, so Dr. Rogers, could you please draft a letter and then let the board review it before we send it out? And then once that letter is being sent, we will share a copy with the community. Okay.
I'd be happy to do so, and I think you've calibrated it just right. So while regionalization has gotten a lot of the attention, I actually am much more concerned about foundation aid. So the way the calendar is going to develop, there is going to be a big announcement about foundation aid in December. And so I plan for some time to have this conversation with the board now in November so that we and the public that we serve are alerted to something that is potentially going to happen. So this also will require a little bit of a history lesson and a little bit of an Albany lesson. So foundation aid, every school district in the state gets some money from the local property tax and it gets some money from Albany. And how much that balance is depends on what the local fiscal capacity of the school district is. But every district, from the biggest district in the state, New York City, with 900,000 kids, to tiny little districts up in the Adirondacks that only have 20 or 30 kids, every district gets some foundation aid and raises the remainder of the money through local property taxes. So there was a long-running lawsuit called the Campaign for Fiscal Equity lawsuit that was ultimately decided by the state's highest court, which is the State Court of Appeals, in 2007, And it ruled that the state had not funded a sound basic education in New York State. And as a result of that, the courts calculated the amount that was necessary for a sound basic education, and that calculation was complicated because a dollar doesn't go nearly as far on Long Island as a dollar would go in Albany or might go in Western New York. So it also calculated that some students were more expensive to educate than others, students with disabilities, for example, or students who might need support learning English. And all of those factors were included in foundation aid. And even though the Campaign for Fiscal Equity won that lawsuit, and even though the courts calculated what the cost of sound basic education would be, the state never fully funded that formula. Instead, it did something called a gap elimination adjustment, which was basically a minus sign. So the state said, we owe you this much, but we're not going to pay $1 million of it. You're only going to get what's left after we take $1 million off the top. And that created tremendous pressure from school districts across the state, lobbying Albany, and another lawsuit trying to enforce the state to make good on the settlement of the CFE lawsuit. So in 2023, Governor Hochul settled the NYSER lawsuit, the second lawsuit, and fully funded the foundation aid. So that was the 23-24 school year. And in her press release, she said she's committed to it. It's going to, she says, actions are more important than words. And while the settlement is the first step, we're following through with funding in the state budget. And not long after that, Mr. Ostrick, who actually left the room, I'll wait until he comes back. Sorry, didn't mean to draw attention. Commented on this. I'll return to his comments in a second. But the very next year after fully funding it, so the 24 year, the governor proposed making dramatic changes to foundation aid that would have resulted in cuts for lots and lots and lots of school districts, including Syosset. So, and Mr. Oster's comment was, how long will the governor follow through on this commitment that she made in 2023? And the answer was, not very long. So in the 2024-25 executive budget proposal, which comes out in January of 24, and the process is to adopt a state budget, the governor proposes a first draft, and then the legislature writes the final draft. There are a lot of rules about how the interplay occurs between the two branches of government, but the bottom line is that the governor offers the first draft in January, and the legislature finalizes a budget usually in April, and then we start taking advantage of that budget in the following school year, which starts in July, but school itself starts in September. So in January, they're building a budget for the following September's school year, and the governor proposed cuts. The cut for Nassau County was over $55 million. The cut for Syosset was about $200,000, about 1% of our foundation aid. And some of the mechanisms that the governor used to reduce aid to schools, this change in the foundation formula that was implemented to settle another lawsuit, she, instead of using current year inflation, because inflation was very high last year, as you'll recall, she used an 8-year average, which averaged in the very, very low years where we had almost zero inflation during the pandemic. And that brought the amount of aid down because it wasn't accurately reflecting what was real world inflation. So the legislature took the governor's budget in January. We and other school districts lobbied hard for restorations to the governor's budget. We lobbied all of our state legislators from the Senate and Assembly. And our legislators and legislators from around the state made restorations to the executive budget and ultimately ended up increasing aid to schools by over $1 billion. But after the governor signed that budget, in that budget, they gave money to the Rockefeller Institute, which is affiliated with the SUNY Albany, and that institute was to report back to the governor by December 1st, so next month, recommendations for how to change foundation aid. And Some of this is overdue. So for example, the foundation aid formula uses student poverty rates from the 2000 census. And you'll see in a slide or two how much Syosset's poverty rate has changed in just 4 or 5 years. So using 24-year-old data to measure student poverty, clearly out of date. Labor costs in the formula are 14 years old. So there's a bunch of things in the formula that absolutely need to be updated. I think they're also underweighting the cost of educating special education students in the current environment that isn't reflected there. There isn't anything in the foundation formula that reflects what we've seen coming out of the pandemic in terms of learning loss for students or mental health needs for students. So there are lots of reasons to fix foundation aid. My concern is that the governor last year fixed foundation aid by making dramatic cuts. And when she adopted the budget back in April of 2024, April of this year, she said, quote, "In the long term, it just doesn't make sense to keep paying for empty seats in classrooms." So that's kind of a red flag in terms of where are empty seats and who is she planning on cutting support for. So the next executive budget is coming this January, so in 2 months. The recommendations from the Rockefeller Institute are coming in December, next month, and I'm concerned about what will be proposed and if a hole is proposed that our legislators have to fill again, and how much will we be affected in Syosset, how much will Nassau County be affected. And this is the thing that I really think we need to keep our eye on, and this is a place where we should certainly focus our energies if it becomes necessary to fight. So I did a little bit of math and asked the question, where are empty seats in New York? And this map shows where enrollment loss has been greatest. So the deeper the red color, the more enrollment loss. But every county in the state has experienced some enrollment loss. There's no county that's experienced enrollment gain. There's just questions of degrees of loss. And then moreover, not every county is identical from school district to school district. You'll see that in a second. So there are some school districts that have experienced more loss than other school districts in any one of these given counties. But the thing that jumps off the map at me is because I worked in a couple of statewide roles earlier in my career, I'm familiar with a lot of these counties, and the places where the enrollment losses are the greatest are the places that are most rural in nature. And so these are school districts that already have small numbers of students, and they will struggle even more with fewer students. And I worry about the governor's proposal not to pay for empty seats disproportionately affecting those areas. And when you listen, if you did listen to the State Education Department's webinar on regionalization, they talked a lot about rural New York and their worries about what might happen with foundation aid and their belief that the regionalization, at least in these rural areas, might be a lifeline for the school districts as opposed to an endangerment to local control. So I wanted to go deep into foundation aid because I am concerned, given what happened last January and where we might find ourselves again this January. So this is Nassau County's enrollment change. These are the 56 school districts of Nassau County, arranged from the greatest enrollment loss since 2016 to the greatest enrollment gain. The greatest enrollment gain is Syosset at over 10%. And it gives you a sense, a little more than two-thirds of the county has been losing enrollment. A handful of districts in the county have been gaining. One school district in the county has really been gaining a lot. That's us. And that's what's behind our facilities needs, and it's a lot of what's driving, our attention and our focus to make sure that we serve the students who are here. So we, again, just if the governor is talking about empty seats, I do worry about what that means for enrollment. I don't worry about what it means for enrollment for us because we're up 10%. But even though we're up 10%, the governor still proposed cutting us by $200,000 last year, which, again, does not make sense to me. So having worked on state aid at the beginning of my career, something I'm familiar with, the factors that the state considers in allocating state aid, by every measure, we should earn more state aid. Our enrollment is up. Our student poverty has gone from 6% to 16%. So talk about using 2000 census data. Look how much our data has changed just in the last 5-6 years. Our numbers of English language learners have almost doubled, again, in the last 5-6 years. And the state has a complicated formula by which they measure local fiscal capacity. But the point here is that our fiscal capacity has also dropped over time, and that would normally result in the state supporting more of the cost of education. So by every measure, we should earn more state aid, and yet last year the governor proposed a cut for us. So I'm grateful to the legislature for listening to our pleas and doing the restorations in aid. But I want to make sure that we remain attentive to what's going on in Albany because of what happened last year and because of where we are. And I'll just say, I think we have, despite the challenges on the left column, we continue to put out a tremendous educational product. Our teachers and the building leaders are doing extraordinary work, and you, the board, are providing the context and the resources that they need to do this good work. So I think our pitch to the state is, we're doing our part, you need to do your part. And then the question would also be, is the state in bad financial position? Is it necessary for them to pass along cuts to us because maybe things aren't going well for the state? So I looked on the state comptroller's website and found a lot of encouraging news about real improvement in Wall Street and the market, which actually accounts for a huge portion of the state income tax proceeds that are used by state government. And local sales tax collections are up. That's a reflection of the economy as well. So given the strong fiscal news from the state comptroller's office, it's not as though the state is facing some yawning deficit and they need to make that up by passing along cuts to school districts. So this is something that I'm very focused on. I will certainly report to you in December about what the Rockefeller Institute reports on foundation aid. And the reason why I wanted to have this conversation in November is because we may need to mobilize in January in order to do what we did last year. But I think we'll have to mobilize more vigorously because there's much more momentum because of the Rockefeller Institute report than there was last year. So I think the legislature was able to make restorations, but I think this year's budget fight will be more difficult. So I'm very attentive to this and absolutely prepared to do what's necessary to protect our interests around state aid. And I alluded earlier that we had this conversation almost 2 years ago, and Mr. Ostrick, you made the point that you asked the question, how bound is the governor by her restoration to, or her settlement of the NYSER lawsuit? And I said that she's not bound because every year is a new year, but I had anticipated that she would continue to fund it since her rhetoric around it had been so strong. And yet, just a year later, she proposed cuts, and this year she's proposed changing the foundation aid formula. So I think you were right to be attentive to that, and we're right to stay continually attentive to it. So on this, what do I think we should do next? We'll watch the December 1st for the Rockefeller Institute study. I think we should, after studying their recommendations, we should send something to the governor even before the governor writes her executive budget in January. And then once that budget comes out, we should be in constant contact with our state legislators until the final budget comes out.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers, for that foundation aid presentation, and also for staying in the forefront again, to stay on top of the foundation aid studies, and as well as writing to the governor in the events of the executive budget proposals. Okay, and at this moment, are there any questions for Dr. Rogers just on foundation aid? Mr. Rotolo?
Thank you, Dr. Rogers, for all the explanation. I just want to add that I'm also part of the Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association, and both Nassau and Suffolk are very focused on the Rockefeller and foundation aid and poverty aid calculation. So it's not just us. We're not here standing alone. And also with the regionalization, this is top of mind. So this is basically board members from school districts all over, so we both have the same concern. So this is not just Syosset, it's all of Long Island. So I just wanted to add that too.
Mr. Ostrich.
So, Dr. Rogers, there's been a high level of energy, civic engagement, enthusiasm, worry, anxiety about the regionalization, and now we've tossed the state aid on the pile. Can you help us sort out where individuals who are concerned should be focusing their attention first or second? In other words, how would you direct this energy of folks in the neighborhoods who want to do something because they have anxiety? Prioritize for them the best use of their time, pens, and emails.
Well, I won't discourage anyone from doing what you are going to do as a board, which is write to the regents and say, make your regulations reflect your rhetoric. So that's a productive use of time right now, right up through January when the regents make the final adoption of their regulations, the formal adoption of their regulations. And I think in this very moment, we're waiting to see what comes out from the Rockefeller Institute. But I think shortly after that, the board can lead with a letter to the executive, to the governor, and community members should follow on the board's lead in terms of how to frame that letter and make sure that the governor is aware that we're attentive to this and that we're concerned that the state continue to provide its share of support for schools and funding.
Okay, are there any more questions for Dr. R? Okay, thank you again, Dr. Rogers, for your presentation. And there are no legislative items, and then we are going to do our discussion items. About 10 days ago, the board attended the 2024 NYSSBA annual convention in New York City, and then we have a few board members who would like to give us an update. And for the law conference, Dr. Park?
So we attended the annual NYSSBA convention in New York City. AI was front and center. During the school law seminar, they addressed legal considerations associated with using AI in the public school workplace. As amazing as AI is, it's not perfect, and understanding its limitations, bias, and unintended discriminatory outcomes is important for its legal concern and practical ramifications. And it really underscored the rapid changes in our world. I think our mission statement rings truer than ever as we prepare our students not only with the intellectual and technological skills, but also with the strength of character needed for their future, which is yet to be envisioned.
Thank you, Dr. Park. And Ms. Falco, would you like to talk about the convention itself?
There you go. So it's always wonderful to get to go to the convention because it's really a great experience to be able to meet with the other board members and other school districts to see the problems that they're facing and how different districts handle different problems. And at the convention, there's so many different and varied presentations. You can find presentations on so many different subjects. I was going to touch a little bit on AI, but since Shani did, I'm going to skip it. So I tend to be drawn a lot to the mental health presentations because I think that it's so important what's going on with our students to make sure that they're healthy and stable, and to create an environment that's happy and inclusive for everybody and kindness. So I always tend to draw into that. And also I know on everyone's mind is social media and all that stuff. So I went to see a lot of those presentations, and there was a few interesting takeaways that there was at the very end, the last presentation that I sat in on. There's this wonderful presentation of somebody who is not anti-technology, but kind of studies the effect on kids and what's good for them. And one of the things that she brought up, and I know it's something that we've been discussing in the district, about cell phone usage during the day. And, she talked about whether, the benefits of having the phones away during the academic courses and during the, the whole day, and the benefits of not having the phone and bringing the community together and having programs for children who rely on the phone during the day and trying to, figure out how to help those children be integrated in a productive way. And so that was super interesting to me. One of the things that she touched upon also was multitasking, which I think everybody is super guilty of. I know I'm very guilty of multitasking. And I actually came home and told all of my friends this, that when you multitask, even simple things like watching a game on TV and scrolling through your phone, which I'm guilty of, it actually, she said, created a fight or flight mode in your brain. And I thought that was so good for the kids to learn, that it actually confuses your brain. It doesn't know what to do, and it makes your body stressed out. So I came home from there and have made all of my children stop multitasking while they're watching TV, and they've now been putting their phones down. But it was really great hearing about all the different mental health things and the social media benefits, and being able to bring it back to discuss as a board on how we could help our children. So some tidbits.
Thank you, Ms. Falco. Mr. Rotolo, would you like to speak about the convention too?
Sure. So one of the breakout sessions that I attended was Colmac High School gave, they have like a school within a school, and this concept was basically creating specialized programs from academics within like the larger school framework, where our students really had an option to like try out a career and a pathway. So they basically had broken out into these 5 schools like STEM and law. And one of the things was, okay, maybe you're interested in law. Well, they actually built a mock courtroom in their school, so they would actually have kids, maybe in 11th grade, saying, oh, I'd like to see how it is to be a judge. I'd like to see how it is to lawyer. But maybe if you did that and then didn't like it, then you could try something else, but at least you kind of test drove it. And this was also accompanied by internships, job shadowing. They also, and SIASA provides some of this stuff too, college preparatory. One of the things that they did is they almost branded each of the schools, so it was almost like a competition between like the STEM school and the legal school and the finance school, all within the school. So I thought it was very creative, and they actually had the students come and speak. So just listening to the students and kind of how their thought process was, because like one child said, oh, I really wanted to go into medicine, and I did like an internship, then I realized, you know what, maybe I want to go into finance. So it kind of gave the students kind of hands-on experience and actually see what the job entailed, and if they liked it, if there was something they wanted to basically proceed. They also had a full financial trading room at the school, so stuff that I've seen in college where students are actually doing what you would do at work, and they meet in conference rooms. I just wanted to add some stuff too. With AI was a big thing there. And they kind of had it broken up between like how the teachers and the school would use it, and how the students also. So a lot of the stuff was really personalized learning, like individual tutoring. Also, one of the things was to basically be able to make a lesson plan kind of tailored to each of the students, especially students that had IEPs. It was amazing, like how quickly they did some demonstrations, how quickly they could actually come up with a plan, where I know would take teachers a lot of time. Plus, there was like real-time feedback. One of the interesting things, just listening to the students, was some of the students were hesitant to ask the teacher a question, but they weren't hesitant to ask the AI a question. So just a lot of little things when you saw it real time, which was really amazing. And then the collaboration between faculty just seemed to make things go really quick and really efficient. So.
Great, thank you, Mr. Rotolo. And Mr. Greco, would you like to add some more?
Why not? So the best part for me is talking to other trustees around the state and school attorneys. And Ms. Falco made the point that it's interesting to hear their concerns, but it's also really interesting to hear about how they operate generally. So obviously, all school boards are bound by various laws, like the open meetings law, but there's a lot of flexibility in the way we actually operate, and it's interesting to hear how some of them do things, and maybe it's something when I want to be really annoying that I'll bring up amongst us as changes to make. But that's always been the best part of these conventions, for me, at least. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for all your sharing. There's no unfinished business, and we are, oh, Mr. Ostrick, I'm sorry.
I wanted to, it's a discussion, right? I just wanted to ask Tommy, the question, the classroom for the careers, was it one class where you tried out a bunch of different things, or it was a series?
So I think how they kind of had it set up was that depending on which grade you're in, so let's say in 11th grade, if you showed interest and said, I want to be an attorney, then you would be able to take those classes almost like electives towards towards, let's say, your major, or again, to try them out. But they also had a lot of community internships and like shadowing. So they'd say, okay, and I know we've done it here at the school where we had, like, I think it was our high school, right, that worked with our architects. So there was kind of a lot of that where you kind of were in a school and it was labeled, so like in the hallway it would say, legal. But then you had a choice, let's say in 10th or 11th grade, to take some of those classes. And then if you didn't like it, you could change. I think they were trying to give you like 2 bites at the apple. Right? You were there, right? Dave was there, yeah. So, my mistake.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rotolo. Mr. Steinberg, would you like to? No.
I'm trying. No, I think you summarized it very nicely, what you saw in that district. And as you pointed out, we do have similar, programs here as well. Certainly we could discuss it, the appropriate time.
I just thought it was interesting if there was like a survey approach where it's like, part of the semester you try this, part of the semester you try this, as opposed to sort of forming that and then going down the line and then changing, as opposed to getting exposure to a couple of different survey opportunities, then from there you sort of branch out. It's just something to think about.
Okay, are we all good? Okay. All right, so we are going to do our new business. And 13A is the approval of staff changes. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13B is the approval of stipends and hourly rates 2024-2025. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13C is the approval of unaligned staff employment agreement 2024-2025. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13D is the appointment of tenure. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations and welcome to. Thank you.
Typically, we have more people who get tenure in the spring, just sort of the way things work, but every once in a while there's someone who's a little bit out of phase, but it doesn't mean you don't get the speech anyway. So the speech goes like this. It's been said that friends are the family you choose for yourself. So in this context, Earning tenure signals that you are the family that we choose for Syosset. You've been with us, you've had the opportunity to work with us. We've identified you as being of great quality to the school district. You're someone that we want to have here for a long period of time to come. This is our expression of confidence in you and our recognition of the work that you've put in. So congratulations on earning tenure, and you've already made us proud. Keep doing so.
Okay. 14 is the 14A is the approval of revised policy 5300, code of conduct, character, and support. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14B and 14C can be taken together. They are the approval of the Committee on Preschool Special Education and the Committee on Special Education recommendations. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15A is the acceptance of audit report. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15B is the authorization of service contracts. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15C is the authorization for special education and/or nursing contracts. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Levitan, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15D is the authorization to participate in a cooperative CDW Government LLC. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15E is the authorization to participate in cooperative SHI International Corp. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Falco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15F is the authorization for deduct change order Cooper Power and Lighting Corp. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15G is the authorization for deduct change order Cooper Power and Lighting Corp. E14. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Falco, seconded by Mr. Greco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15H is the authorization for deduct change order Cooper Power and Lighting Corp. E-17. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15I is the authorization for contracts for federal Part B funds. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Mr. Ostrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15J is the approval of student club charters 2024-2025. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15K is the approval of student group charters 2024-2025. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 15L is the adoption of grants. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? And then we are going to move to audience to the public. And please just bear with me. I would have to read the procedures to the public. Okay. The Syosset Board welcome attendance at Board of Education meetings. The board business meeting will be live streamed and recorded. A link to access live stream is available on the district website at the following. And the board values community input and provides opportunities to offer that input via email or in person. Persons who wish to speak during audience to the public must register online to speak in advance of the meeting by 5 p.m. the day of the board meeting. A link to the pre-registration form will be made available on the homepage on the district website 1 week before the meeting. Persons wishing to address the board in person during audience to the public must conform to procedures adopted by the board. Speakers' remarks must conform to the following rules. 1, all speakers and observers are required to conduct themselves in a respectful and civil manner in accordance with the rules set by the board. 2, speakers must address the board only, not members of the audience or the audience as a whole. 3, speakers must limit their comments to issues concerning the school district operations, school district affairs, or board policy. 4, because of rights protected by state and federal law, no speaker may speak about an individual student or staff member, nor will the board or administration entertain questions in public regarding collective bargaining, negotiations, personnel matters, student matters, or legal matters. 5, no speaker may speak about decisions involving specific personnel or specific students. If a speaker wishes to address the board concerning specific personnel or specific students, the speaker must write to the board. 6, speakers may not use epithets, slurs, personal abuse, lewd or obscene speech, profanity, libelous speech, threats, and fighting words or gestures, defined as words or gestures which by their very utterance inflict injury or tend to incite a breach of peace. Any person who violates the rules above will immediately forfeit the balance of their time addressing the board. To be recognized to speak, person must register with their full name and address and attest that they will comply with the rules stated above. In addition, only residents of the Syosset Central School District are permitted to address the board. Each resident will have 4 minutes to address the board, which may extend it or reduce at the discretion of the chair for good cause. The board will not permit polling of the board members by speakers. After every resident wishing to speak had an opportunity to do so, the board or administration may respond to residents' questions or comments. No resident will be permitted to address the board more than once per meeting. No one may record another member of the public in a manner that's disruptive or confrontational. Okay, and then with that, we will begin our audience to the public.